This episode is sponsored by Schwans.com. What are you having for dinner tonight? Good question. Schwans Home Delivery has a solution for you. Stock up your freezer with high-quality frozen foods like premium meats and sides, delicious ready-made meals, ice cream, and more. No subscriptions, no memberships, just a friendly yellow truck that's been delivering food for almost 70 years. Listeners of this show get a special deal. Get 20% off your first order with code YUM20. Check out schwans.com/yum for details.
This is No BS Job Search Advice Radio, episode 1865. I'm your host, Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome. Again, last show of the week. I'm taking tomorrow off. I'll be back on Sunday with my normal format of shorter blips, shorter episodes, and I think I'm going to have one long-form interview next week. And this show today is an interview I did with Paul Ratcliffe in May of 2016 about evaluating for fit as part of your decisioning about joining an organization. Hope you find it helpful and give it a great review wherever you listen to the show. Just so you know, this was recorded over Skype. There were a couple of points where I don't think my audio was ideal, but his was. And I just thought it was worth sharing with you. And now let's get going. So my guest this time is Paul Ratcliffe. Paul is a certified professional business coach, and he also works with high potential individuals and coaches them through change into senior leadership roles. Paul, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on board.
Hi, Jeff. How are you today?
Fabulous. Now that I know you are here.
Thanks for arranging this. Been looking forward to it.
My pleasure. So let me just start by saying that employers like to think they evaluate for fit, and they do a miserable job of it. After all, their version of evaluating for fit is, Paul, that guy kind of reminds me of Henry up on 4. And that's as much as they really do. They compare you with someone that they know, think that you're just like that. In the therapy business, we call that projection. It doesn't work. And then they get shocked when you join the firm and you're nothing like Henry. So they make that mistake on their side. But from a job hunter perspective, I think a lot of people do much the same sort of thing too. They look at their future boss and say, wow, I really like this person. They are fabulous. So we know there's got to be a better way for job hunters to evaluate for fit. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely on the nail.
I would hope so, because we know that this was the show idea we were going to do. So where should a job hunter start off in trying to figure out whether they'd really fit the organization they're interviewing with?
That's a great question, Jeff. And there's lots of different ways that people can start. But the model that I prefer to use with people is what's called a career master fit, so F.I.T. And that's broken into 2 basic sections that help job hunters figure out what they're good at, what they're going to like, where their interests lie, and then it also asks them about how they're going to feel fulfilled, what things are matter to them, etc., etc. So the model breaks down into 2 columns, if you can imagine them. And on the left-hand side, you've got external fit, which I'll explain in a second, and then the internal fit. So starting with the external fit, what a person's first needs to ask themselves is, the F stands for function. So what do I like to do? What do I want to do? What strengths, skills, passions do I have? And a good question that I like to ask people is, have you excelled at anything in the past? That always gives me a really good indication of where people's true motivations lie, because if they can remember something that they've excelled at, they're usually driven by, motivated, and quite passionate about it.
I'm going to pause you there for 1 second, because I can see some of the people I've talked to in my career say, well, there was that time I was at a Knicks game in New York. I really liked watching the Knicks. I somehow suspect you don't mean that they watch sports on TV or they went to a game. You're talking
Yes, yeah, on the nail. Yeah. So this is all driven by where they exceed in a professional environment. That being said, if people talk about sports, there's a lot that you can get from asking the right questions and probing and challenging people on that, for sure, because it drives the passion. So, so what is it about the game, or what is it about the team that they like? So it definitely fits in there. It's just unfortunate we can't get everybody to play for the Knicks, which it make our lives a lot easier. So after we've talked through the function, we then move on to the I of the F.I.T model, which is interests and industry. So now that we figured out what we want to do and why we want to do it and what we like, then we figure out where we're going to apply those skills. We ask, when you take those skills, what are you going to do with those skills and who you're going to work with? And one of the great questions that I like to ask in this particular section is, what do you want to avoid? So you might think, I'm really good at X and I want to go and apply it to Y, and then I'm going to get Z as a result. And that's a lot of the times is not the case. So I do ask that question. It really makes people think about, okay, maybe I was on the wrong path, or, maybe I can apply it in a different sort of way. So I challenge people in that environment.
It's very good because, as someone who's interviewed so many people over my career, I find that the answers I get when I ask about their likes are pretty thin.
Yeah.
And they're almost habitual. I want to do interesting work. I want to work for smart people. They all say that. And thus, I'd like to go start at the opposite side. What do you detest? And I always pick a charged word like that, because then I get the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
And they can flip it around to the other side. So if you detest that, the opposite of that is, and then we find the place in the middle between the two.
Yeah, that's a great question. Is conversely, what would you like to avoid? And it's always, it stops people dead in the tracks, and they think, oh, that's it's really interesting. I haven't thought of it from that respect, but exactly what you just said, you can find the true passion there. So then we move on to the T, which is things that matter. So this is another really important question, because, and I'll give you probably a bad example, but it's very simple to follow. Function, skill set, I want to be a CEO, and you've worked the way through, I want to be the boss of my own business. And then you get to things that matter, and I ask tell me about what lifestyle that you want to achieve. Tell me where your values lie. Tell me about the geography. Tell me about your work hours. What things matter to you? And I've had people say, I want to be the CEO of a company, but I only want to work 25 hours a week because I've got to pick my kids up from school. So whoa, let's just hold on there. Yeah, let's find out what things really matter to you. And things like ethical values of companies that are going to work for, all of those things that matter. And there's some spiritual things that matter to people. So if people are particularly religious and they're going into a company that maybe isn't that way inclined, or has a lot of people that are not that way inclined, or vice versa. So all of those questions really matter, and that's another big area that I probe on. So that's the outline of the external fit, the career fit model. And then we flip into the internal, which is really looking at the individual themselves and really focusing on them. And this can be very challenging for people because, as we all know, the hardest thing to sell in the world is ourselves. But it really, truly makes them look at themselves. So the F in the internal fit is fulfillment. So why do you go to work? What purpose or cause or legacy do you want to create? What difference do you want to make? And when they start answering those questions, I ask them why is that particularly rewarding for you? So that really challenges them to think about who they are as an individual and what. So they've just come out of the things that matter on the external fit. Now they're looking at how they're going to feel fulfilled in that particular role.
It's very interesting. Fulfillment is such an important quality, and it's such a simple word, yet it's one that people really wrestle with, in my experience. Is that what you find as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing I was going to mention is probably a good moment to mention this, Jeff, is one of the reasons I got into career coaching and exec coaching is 70% of the American workforce is disengaged, and that's according to a 20-year ongoing survey by Gallup.com. I was reading on their website this morning. I do that once a month, and it's very consistent. And I think fulfillment is one of the big key areas that people don't, I don't think they think it through all the way. They go for the money, they get the job, and they end up bouncing around from job to job because they're not fulfilled, or they find themselves stuck in a particular area. So they might like the company, but they're not going anywhere. They're not getting promoted. They're getting overseen for salary increases, etc., etc. So fulfillment
I think the other reason they wind up making these mistakes stems from the fact that most people still have an industrial mindset where they think that if they do a good job, they're going to be rewarded, they will work their way up, and they act that way even though intellectually they know it isn't true. So they tolerate a lot of crap thrown at them until one day, the firm basically says, we appreciate your service, thank you so much, but you know how it is, the economy is, or we've had a reorganization, and they're invited to leave.
Yeah.
So we're going to be back with more from Paul in just a moment, but first, okay, we're back, thank you. So we've been talking about fulfillment and how people kind of struggle with giving voice to what their needs are in this equation, and what inspires them at a deep core level.
Absolutely.
And there's still two more letters in there that we haven't gotten to.
There is.
On the internal fit side.
Yeah, so on the internal fit, so the I is identity. So that's some question about, so what we ask is who are you now, and who are you becoming, or who do you want to become? And a lot of the times I let silence do the heavy lifting for me there, because it's important that people really think about who they are now and where they want to be. Could be one. And if you ask in a way, who do you want to be in 1 year's time? Everybody says CEO. That's not the question. It's who are you becoming as a person? What's your identity going to be when you find this role that you're looking for? Where are you going to take it, and what are you going to do with it? So it's kind of tipping back into the passion and the purpose and driving the value behind it. So a good question would be to ask, give me some single adjectives that best describe you. So, and how other people perceive you. Give me one word answers of how you think other people's, and then see if those two things align and run some comparisons in there. So it's really tapping into the person's identity.
That's interesting. I've been coach training for a while now, and I have been coached and coach others. One of the common threads is about the becomings. If you do this thing, if you make this change, who will you become as a result of this? To see whether or not you get that shocked expression from them. Because as we know, ultimately we have to change in order to get the things that we want.
Yeah, very challenging question. Yeah. So another question to throw in there as well is to ask them who their role models are. And when they answer that, say, well, why is that person your role model? What is it in particular? And a lot of people think that they like, you touched on it earlier, think that they like someone, but they don't really understand why. So we're really tapping and challenge them on that level as well.
That's interesting. I follow up, and I'll ask that later on. We've got the T here. What's the T?
So now we're talking about the type of person. So it stands for type. So typical questions would be, how do you re-energize your batteries when you're feeling down? What do you do? How do you go about making decisions in life? Are you kind of a knee-jerk type person, or are you very logical in your approach? Do you need to know everything? Does everything need to be in order before you move forward? So what type of decisions do you make? How do you orient your environment? You walk into a new environment, what's the first thing that you do? Are you looking for the fire exit doors? Are you looking for the bathrooms, or are you looking for the person to shake their hand? What type? So it's finding out how the person really thinks and how they operate as an individual. And that really helps us to kind of put the icing on the cake.
And in terms of, there's obviously follow-up to this as well, to pull this out further. So how do you orient your environment is a curious question to me. What do you normally hear when people answer that question?
To be honest with you, Jeff, a lot of the time people can't answer that question because it's something, you jump in your car and you drive to work. You don't think about, I need to press the pedal and hold the wheel, and you just do it. And people do a lot of things like that very, very naturally, and they don't even think that they're doing, don't even realize what they're doing. Just things like, I talked to somebody recently about eye contact when they go in for an interview, because I picked up on the fact that they were not looking at me when I was coaching them. And I said, you need to have a lot more eye contact. And they honestly thought they did. They felt they were staring, but there was a lot of kind of, this business going on. So people don't really understand what they're doing until they really think about it. So if they can't come up with something, I'll say, let's put you in an environment. And okay, now tell me what you're seeing. Just think through an environment that you've been in recently. So it's amazing how people think. A lot of the times, they're asking, they're looking for the exits before they're looking for the entrance. They always remember how they come in, and they always remember how they go out, but everything in between kind of gets fuzzy.
And I know as part of coaching, one of the things I've grown to understand and believe is when you're in a particular environment, you kind of adapt to that environment. And the question becomes, do you want to adapt to a particular type of environment, or do you need to change the environment in order to be the person that you want to become?
Yeah. I teach people how important it is when you walk into a reception area. There's usually a lot to learn about a company when you walk in there. There's usually historical landmarks on there or awards that they've won, and those are interesting things you can bring up in an interview that show that you've actually done some research. So just tiny little things like that about being aware and making the most of your time while you're there. That's something that really, really push on people.
Agreed. And sometimes you can just tell the energy in an environment.
Yes.
You hear a buzz in a certain place when you hear absolute silence in another place. And there's messages in that people can take away that often they forget. So when they get to the interview, and now they have all this wonderful data, and I've taken some notes down because I was curious, what sort of questions might they ask? How do they engage in evaluating for fit once they're on site and being interviewed?
Yeah, so I think once you've got an awareness of who you are and where your passion lies, and you're obviously targeting, hopefully by then, you're going to be targeting a company or a role for a particular reason, and you know why you're going in there. And for me, what I've seen in people is, firstly, is that their passion is just elevated because it means so much to them. They're going for something they really want. They're not just going to find a job or put a warm body on a warm seat. They're going for something that they're connected with. So when if you can think of something that you're passionate about, it doesn't matter what it is. You're into it. If it's basketball, you know all the scores, you know all the competitors, you know who the good team and the bad team. But if you're not into basketball, it's like, So if you're into something that you're going for and you're really, really keen on the company and you're really keen on the role, you're much more likely to do a lot of research because you want to look good, you want to sound good, you want to be knowledgeable because you actually care about where you're going. Like I said, it's not just a job now. You're going for that. You're going for that role that you've been kind of building yourself up to. So, that's what I really emphasize on this. It seems like a kind of a boring exercise at times, but the end result is it's just so much different when people go through this because they find a lot more about themselves, not just about what their interests are, what they want to do, but they find how passionate they are about certain things in life that maybe they didn't realize before.
So true. And I'll just simply say, folks, that for a lot of you, work is just nothing more than a few dollars more, and the government's going to take half, and you're going to go to work every morning complaining again, all because you didn't do your homework. So, folks, you just got to do this exercise. It's not that tough. You just got to spend a little time on the weekend to focus on yourself and your needs, because you got to admit that next firm that's going to hire you sure isn't going to care.
Absolutely.
You are not their A priority.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I apologize. I spoke over you. Could you repeat that, please?
Oh, sorry, I was just saying you have to stand out. You have to. I was doing another blog talk a couple of days ago, and I said the same thing. You know, hiring managers nowadays are very, very distant from us. They're behind portals, behind job boards. So you only got that one opportunity to walk through the door and blow them away. You know, you should walk out knowing that no matter who comes in the door behind you, you've got the job. And by going through this exercise, it will absolutely get you there. 100%.
And what's beautiful is if the firm doesn't match up with what your needs are, what a relief that should be for you.
Yes.
And I got to put it that bluntly, because so many people wind up in jobs they loathe so soon. And, you know, there's a statistic I saw not too long ago, and if I'm slightly off on the numbers, I apologize, but I recall somewhere between 70 and 80% of all hiring managers within 1 year of the hire regret having made that decision.
Correct.
Part of that is them and their assessment process, but part of that is you and your willingness to put on a happy face that's completely insincere, and come back with all those wonderful happy answers that suggest to them that you are not as you portray yourself. You're putting that smile button face on and selling a load of crap.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore, Jeff. Yeah, it's important that people go through this, and if nothing else, I mean, there's probably 10 or 12 steps you could talk about before going out to look for a job, as you probably agree with me on that. But this is, I think, is one of the key critical steps that people, because if you don't understand yourself, then what you cannot possibly understand why you're chasing down the jobs that you are.
So we get to the interview, and I'm all gung ho because I'm armed to the teeth. I've got my notes. I've thought about it beforehand, and now I'm going to go to this interview. And they're going to say to me, "So, do you have any questions for us?" Now, I've got one. I'm just going to keep repeating it over and over again, because it's the one that's focused on them, and we're going to talk about some of the ones that are focused on you. The one that's focused on them, I always encourage us, let's say you hire me and it's a year from now. I haven't just done a good job, I've done a great job. Most of the best you've ever seen in a role like this. What would I have accomplished during that year that would cause you to think that way? Now, I think you'll learn a lot of good stuff from that.
Yeah.
But there are questions embedded in your answers here that you can ask. And Paul, I'm curious, what sort of questions you might recommend someone to ask in order to evaluate whether an employer will give them these things that they want?
Yeah, a really great question, Jeff, and I think I was in staffing and recruiting for just over 20 years myself, so we're similar backgrounds, and I think being a hiring manager myself and bringing recruiter after recruiter through the ranks, the one thing that I always hoped that they would ask me but never seemed to ask me was, how many hours per week am I going to really have to work to be effective in this role?
Yeah, I want to clarify that one, because I think a lot of people are going to say, you're saying, how many hours a week am I going to work? Now, I heard a nuanced difference in
Yes.
how many hours a week will I need to work in order to be effective
In this role.
Yeah.
And nobody ever asked me that. And I think for me, my point was, if you want to be successful in any job, But particularly in where there's a lot of research, and in recruitment, as you well know, there's a lot of research that needs to be done, as well as talking to people, as well as sales and development, marketing, etc. You have to put the extra time in. And I don't mean sit there till 10 o'clock at night at the desk and kind of scratch around on LinkedIn and hope for the best. I'm talking about, go home and get your work-life balance, but be committed. So look out for news articles, read about the industry, what the latest trends are in the industries. All of those things show that you are really caring and passionate, and you've done your research, and you bring your stuff to the table, you bring your value to the table. So my team, when I had a team previously, was about 70 deep at its absolute peak. And I used to say to people, for everybody who's certainly based in Houston, everybody knows someone that's based in oil and gas. Everybody. So find out who they are. We don't have to market them, we don't have to sell to them, but let's find out who they are and what they do, and have an interest in the oil and gas cycle, and find out where they fit into that cycle. So just showing a level of interest like that, when you come in and talk back to your employer, my neighbor works for X and he does this, it shows them that you're really caring, and you're really getting into the role. And that's something I think people can really. It doesn't take a lot to go a lot further than the average person, just by putting a little bit more effort in.
That's such a wonderful statement. It doesn't take a lot to show that you'll go further than the average person.
Yes.
So true. But I'm going to circle back one more time on the question. And the question is the specifics of what someone might ask in order to find out how a firm mesh up with the fit. What sort of things do you think you might ask in order to find out answers?
That's a difficult one to kind of broad stroke across every person, because it really depends. Some people, when you ask them about function, they get really fired up, and then they don't particularly have things that matter to them. So I really focus in, and I can feel that where the passion lies, that it kind of lights up when they talk about it. But if they've got particular strengths and skills and passions, for example, that they ask the employer, I'm really passionate about this. How do you think that I could bring that to the table, and that would benefit you as the employer? And I talk a lot to people about everything in this day and age, as you are well aware, Jeff, is what's in it for me. And the employer is thinking like that as well. So think like the employer sat on the opposite side of the desk from you, and say, if they bring me in, what's their return on investment for paying me the salary and the benefits, etc., whatever you decide to come up with? What's the return on investment? So if you've got a particular strength or a skill or a passion that you think you can add benefit to that employer, you're touching on that return on investment. So ask them that. Ask them a question like that. It's something that they're not expecting whatsoever, but I am really skilled, or I am strong in this particular area, or I'm passionate about. How do you think, if I brought that to the table, how do you think that would get a return on investment for you guys?
Beautiful. Well, I'm just asking one last thing. What haven't I asked you about so far that I should have, that we really cover in addressing fit?
I think the overall thing for me in this fit model, and what I try to emphasize with people, is there's another part of the career branding exercise that we go through that looks at what people are authentically. And what I mean by that is, people put on a costume to go to work in probably 90% of the time. They're not really them. How many people have said, if anybody knew what you were really like, it's that type of approach. So I say to people, if you were your true, authentic self, no holds barred, what's that going to look like, and why can't you take that into the workforce? Because so many people have this facade that they build themselves around. So this whole career master fit is driven towards being your authentic self, being true to yourself, and taking that into the workplace. Because if you do that, there's no costume to put on, there's nothing to hide. You can be yourself, you can be passionate and you're purposeful about why you're going to work, and everything else will be in your rearview mirror. You'll be onwards and upwards.
That's today's show. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, here are a few more ways to get information and advice from me. First of all, visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. Go to the blog. There's a lot there to help you with your job search, hiring more effectively, managing and leading in workplace-related issues. In addition, if you're interested in my coaching you, there's a button there that says schedule. Schedule time for a free discovery call or schedule yourself in for coaching. Obviously, I'm going to charge for that, but I can help you with interview preparation, leadership coaching, salary negotiation advice, making a good decision between different offers, anything related to improving yourself in the workplace, I can coach you about. If you have questions for me, you can schedule 15 minutes with me at thebiggamehunter.us/live, or a less expensive way is at thebiggamehunter.us/video answers, where you leave a message for me and I'll respond with a 3 to 5 minute video. Connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/thebiggamehunter. I can assure you your network will expand a lot by connecting with me. And finally, watch me on TV. Download the JobSearch TV app for Fire TV, Fire Stick, Apple TV, Roku, like 90 different manufacturers. I'll be back tomorrow with more, and in the meantime, I hope you have a terrific day. Be great!
Does anybody want breakfast? Guys, let's go. I'm leaving for McDonald's in 5 seconds. Why didn't you start with that?
The Breakfast Stampede Meal. It's only at McDonald's, where there's a meal for every morning.
And nothing says morning like a classic sausage McMuffin with egg. Right now, get this all-time favorite for just $2 on the $1, $2, $3 menu. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
When you're ready to ride Metro, we want you to know we're ready for you. Here are just a few of the people at Metro to tell you how we're doing our part to keep riders safe.
We're cleaning like never before with hospital-grade cleaning.
You'll find hand sanitizer stations all over the Metro.
No mask, no Metro. Need one? We have a few extras.
At Metro, we're doing our part to keep the DC area moving. Find out more at WMATA.com/doingourpart.